My cousins walked away from my grandfather's funeral with millions. A yacht, a penthouse overlooking Manhattan, and control of his $27 million company. And me, I was handed a wrinkled envelope. Inside it, just one plane ticket to Rome. The room went silent at first. Then someone snickered. Another burst out laughing like it was the punchline to some private joke. I just stood there, feeling every set of eyes burning into me like I was the entertainment. Before I begin, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if stories like this stay with you, please like and subscribe. It really helps me continue sharing the truths I've carried for years. My name is Emily, and for most of my life, I thought I knew what family meant. My grandfather, Joe Harrison, was the only one who ever made me feel like blood actually mattered. A man who built his empire from nothing, who had magazines writing about his success like it was legend. But to me, he was the man who made perfect pancakes and called me Emmy Girl. I was the odd one out in the Harrison family. We weren't poor, but compared to my cousins, we may as well have been invisible. They wore designer coats to Christmas. I wore a jacket from a yard sale. They talked about yachts and Aspen trips. I talked about weekend shifts and scholarships. The only place I never felt less than was beside Grandpa Joe. He'd tap the top of my hand with his warm, leathered fingers and say, "Worth isn't counted in dollars, sweetheart." Back then, I believed it. When he passed away, grief hit me like a storm. I cried more for him than I had for my own father when he left years before. The world felt quieter without Grandpa's laugh, the one that filled rooms like sunlight. But the will reading shattered something in me. My aunt shrieked with joy when her daughter got the penthouse. Champagne corks popped. At a funeral, someone joked he knew who the favorites were. Laughter followed like hyenas circling a carcass. Then they called my name. The lawyer didn't smile, didn't build suspense. He simply placed a small, worn envelope in my hand like it was nothing. My fingers trembled as I opened it. A plane ticket. Rome, Italy. One way. Date printed for the end of that week. The room erupted again. Not in sympathy, in amusement. Seriously? A ticket? Maybe she'll get a postcard too. I can still hear it. Their voices like tiny knives. My mother reached for my arm afterward, her eyes glossy. She whispered, "He must have wanted you to see something, honey." But even she looked confused, hurt for me. That night, I set the ticket on my dresser. I stared at it through the dark like it was a riddle meant only for me. Why Rome? Why me? Why nothing else? Part of me wanted to tear it up and stay home out of pride. But another part, the part that remembered Sundays with pancakes and Joe's quiet wisdom, kept me awake. He wasn't a careless man. He never did anything without purpose. So 3 days later, I stood at the airport with a suitcase packed more with questions than clothes. The moment I stepped off the plane in Rome, jet-lagged and heartbroken, I froze. A man in a black suit was waiting just beyond customs. He held a sign with my name, Emily Harrison. No smile, no explanation, just a nod, like he'd been expecting me for years. I walked toward him slowly, heartbeat loud in my ears. He looked me dead in the eyes, leaned closer, and said 6 quiet words that made my knees weaken. But I'll get to that. First, you need to know why those words changed everything. If you've ever flown across the world with a heart full of confusion and a suitcase of hopes you're not sure you deserve, you know the feeling I had stepping outside that airport. Rome was warm, the kind of warm that smells like roasted chestnuts, taxi exhaust, and history. People rushed around me speaking Italian like poetry. I stood still, clutching the strap of my old leather bag like it was an anchor. The man with my name on his sign didn't speak right away. He simply lifted his hand toward a black car parked at the curb. A driver. For me. The same girl who got the pity ticket. Inside, the seats were soft, buttery leather, the kind my cousins sank into every day of their privileged lives. I kept waiting for someone to walk up and say there'd been a mistake. That this wasn't for Emily Harrison, just the other Harrison. He finally spoke once we were on the highway. His voice was steady, barely accented. Your grandfather made arrangements. 6 words, but not the 6 words from earlier. These were different. They only raised more questions. I stared at him. Arrangements for what? He didn't answer. Instead, he handed me a small wooden box from the glove compartment about the size of a journal. My name was carved into the lid. My breath caught. He looked at me through the rearview mirror and said, as if rehearsed, "You'll open it soon." The city blurred outside, golden buildings, narrow streets, scooters darting between cars like fish in water. I pressed the box to my chest and felt something shift inside me, the beginning of a story I never asked for, but maybe needed. We pulled up to a tall, old villa just outside the city center, vines covering white stone walls, windows with iron balconies, the scent of jasmine and old secrets in the air. A housekeeper named Rosa greeted me in English smoother than mine. "Welcome, Signorina Harrison. Your room is ready." She said it like she'd been waiting. I wanted to ask why. For how long? Who is paying for this? But I followed her silently up the staircase, past oil paintings and shelves of leather-bound books. Everything felt expensive, ancient, like stepping into someone else's skin. My room was beautiful. Big windows, fresh flowers, sheets soft as clouds. Too beautiful for someone who was given just a plain ticket. I showered, changed into clean clothes, then sat on the balcony looking over Rome's skyline. The sun dipped below terracotta rooftops, and for a moment, grief washed over me again. I missed Grandpa Joe's laugh, his hand steady on mine, the way he'd look at me like he saw something in me no one else bothered to notice. Why send me here? Why alone? That night, Rosa made dinner for two, though only I sat at the table. A single candle flickered. Pasta, wine, silence. As I twirled spaghetti on my fork, I overheard Rosa whisper to the driver in the hallway, "Does she know yet?" His reply was quiet, too quiet to catch. My stomach tightened. Later, in bed, I held the small wooden box. My fingers traced my name carved on top again and again until sleep dragged me under. I dreamed of Grandpa, standing in his study, smiling gently, saying, "This is where it begins, Emmy." When morning light spilled across the room, I finally opened the box. Inside wasn't money, not jewelry, not keys to anything luxurious. It was a letter, and a single photograph, one I had never seen before. The photo was of Grandpa, standing in front of a door carved with an ancient symbol. Beside him was a woman I didn't recognize, with my eyes. And that was the moment my heartbeat changed rhythm. Because the letter began with, "If you are reading this, Emily, then the truth must finally come." My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. Grandpa's handwriting, familiar loops and slants, pulled me straight back to childhood, sitting at his desk drawing while he worked. But this letter wasn't warm or casual. It felt heavy. "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then my time has passed, and you've made the journey I hoped you would." I swallowed hard. He knew I'd come. He believed in it. You must feel confused, maybe even hurt. But there are things the rest of the family could never understand, things I could only trust you with. I paused there. Confused? Yes. Hurt? Deeply. But only trust me with? What could that possibly mean? There is something in Rome that belongs to you. Something hidden for decades. You will receive guidance. Follow it. Do not turn back. Follow what? Guidance from who? My mind spun. At the bottom of the letter, a single line was underlined twice. Find the woman in the photograph. The photograph. I stared at it again, the woman beside Grandpa, smiling softly. Her hair dark like mine, eyes shaped like mine. A stranger, but familiar. Who was she? I slipped the letter and photo back into the box when Rosa knocked gently and stepped inside with coffee. She noticed the box open on my lap and froze. Not shock, recognition. "You found it," she murmured, voice tight. I nodded slowly. "Do you know her?" I pointed at the woman in the picture. For a second, just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Fear, sadness, maybe both. Her reply was too quick. "No, I've never seen her." A lie. I felt it. She left the room almost immediately, as if she had said too much or too little. The hallway felt colder after she disappeared. All day, questions followed me like shadows. Why did Rosa react that way? Why send me here alone? Who was that woman? The next morning, the driver, his name I learned was Marco, knocked and said, "There is someone you must meet." Just like that. No details. No comfort. Only a direction. We drove into the heart of Rome. Streets tangled like veins. Vespas zipped between cars. Tourists laughed. Vendors shouted. The city breathing around me like something alive. Marco finally stopped in a quiet alley near an old bakery. He pointed to a small wooden door marked with the same symbol as in the photograph. A circle split by a vertical line. My pulse jumped. "Who's inside?" I asked. Marco only said, "Family." That word hit me harder than expected. Family. The same word that had hurt me only days earlier. Yet now, it felt like a key. One I didn't know how to use. I took a breath and stepped toward the door. The wood was smooth, worn by time. I lifted my hand, but before I could knock, it opened from the inside. An elderly woman stood before me. Silver hair twisted into a bun, deep lines across her soft face, and eyes that widened when she saw me, eyes shining with recognition and something like affection. She whispered, voice breaking, "You look just like your mother." Mother? But my mother had never been to Rome. She never mentioned Italy, or this house, or this woman. I stuttered, "Do you know my mom?" The woman stepped back, gesturing me in. Her hands shook slightly. Inside was a small room filled with old books, framed photographs, and the smell of lemon and aging paper. She motioned for me to sit, and when I did, she placed a shaky hand on top of mine. "I've waited many years to see you," she said softly. "Your grandfather promised you would come." 100 questions clawed inside my chest. "Who are you?" I asked, barely breathing. The woman exhaled, like releasing a truth she had held too long. "My name is Isabella, and I am your grandmother." The room tilted. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. My grandmother? But Grandpa's wife, my known grandmother, died before I was born. So who was Isabella? And why had I never heard her name? For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. My grandmother. Another grandmother, hidden, erased, alive. I blinked at Isabella, trying to form words. My grandmother. But my family never. She raised a gentle hand. "They don't speak of me. They never wanted you to know." My pulse thudded in my ears. All those years, holidays where everyone tiptoed around certain stories, moments when Mom's eyes clouded during conversations about the past. Now puzzle pieces trembled, trying to connect. "Why?" I whispered. She stood slowly, crossing the room with deliberate steps. On her wall hung photos, old, faded, full of faces I half recognized. There was Grandpa Joe in many of them, younger, smiling, arm around Isabella. Their happiness looked raw and real, nothing like the cold family portraits at home. She paused at a particular photo, her holding a baby. The baby's eyes were unmistakable. My eyes. "Your mother," she said. I felt a tremor run through me. Mom never spoke about her childhood. Not once. I always assumed it was just painful memories. But this? A whole side of her life hidden away. Isabella continued, voice weighted with years. "Your grandfather and I loved each other. But his wealth, his success, it changed the people around him. His family didn't believe I was suitable. Too foreign. Too simple. Too inconvenient." Her lips pressed tightly. "They forced us apart. Money speaks loudly, child. And powerful families, they erase what doesn't fit their image." My throat tightened. I imagined Grandpa, young and in love, then torn from it. I imagined Mom, a baby hidden, maybe even shamed. "Your mother grew up here for her first years," Isabella continued, "before they took her to America. Promised her a better life, they said. But they cut me out. Completely." Taze pricked my eyes, anger mixing with grief. "So Grandpa sent me here to find you?" I asked. She nodded. "He never stopped loving either of us. He tried to see your mother again when she was grown. But she refused, Not because she hated us, but because the past hurt her too deeply. That sentence hit like a blow. My mother, who raised me alone, worked herself to exhaustion, had been carrying this weight all my life. I sat there, shaking, absorbing the truth like cold rain. Isabella took a small wooden envelope from a drawer, tied with red thread. Joe left this for you. He said when you come, I must give you this next. My fingers tingled as I opened it. Inside was another letter, shorter, urgent. Emmy, you are the bridge between two halves of a story broken long ago. The business, the mansion, the yacht, I never meant for them. I chose you because you are the only one with heart above greed. There is something more valuable than money waiting for you. Go to the old chapel tomorrow. Trust Isabella. More valuable than millions? What could that even mean? I sat back, dizzy. All my life I thought I didn't fit into the Harrisons because I wasn't enough, not rich enough, not polished enough. But now, maybe I didn't fit because I wasn't one of them. Not fully. Isabella served tea, her hand steady despite her age. As I sipped, she watched me with soft eyes. You must understand, she said. Your cousins believe inheritance means wealth, but your grandfather believed inheritance means truth. That line lodged itself inside me. Inheritance means truth. I thought of the will reading, their laughter, the envelope tossed like trash. They got money. I got secrets. But maybe secrets had power. As I left Isabella's house, the photograph burned in my pocket. I looked back once. She stood by the doorway, smiling like she finally exhaled after decades. When Marco drove me back to the villa, the city felt different. Alive. Whispering, as if Rome itself knew something I didn't. That night I barely slept. If the chapel letter was right, tomorrow I'd step deeper into a story buried long before I was born. And deep down, beneath fear and doubt, I felt something else, a spark. Not greed, not revenge, but purpose. Still, one thought haunted me. If Grandpa trusted me with this truth, what would the family do if they found out? Morning came slowly, like the city was holding its breath with me. I woke before sunrise, the letter on my nightstand staring back like a dare. The old chapel. Whatever waited there, truth, pain, inheritance, I needed to face it. But I didn't move right away. I sat on the edge of the bed, fingers tangled in my hair, letting everything settle. The funeral, the plane ticket, Isabella, a hidden grandmother, a hidden history. The unfairness of it all pressed against my ribs, but instead of breaking me, it solidified something. I wasn't here for yachts or shares. I was here because Grandpa believed in me. The same man who told me, never measure your worth in dollars, Emmy. Now I understood. He meant it. I showered, pulled on jeans and a soft white blouse, then opened the wooden box one more time. Inside, beneath the letter I'd read, was something I hadn't noticed, a small brass key on a thin chain. Warm in my palm, heavy with meaning. I slipped it around my neck. Downstairs, Marco waited beside the car like he somehow sensed today mattered. Rosa handed me a thermos of coffee and a piece of bread wrapped in cloth, her eyes worried, kind. You'll need strength, she said. Strength for what? No one would answer fully, yet everyone seemed to know the path ahead. The drive to the chapel wound through quiet countryside, olive trees, crumbling stone walls, birds gliding over ancient fields. A world older than the greed of inheritance and family fighting. I felt the weight of my decision. I could turn back. Tell Marco to drive me to the airport. Pretend I never opened the box. But that wasn't who I was. Not anymore. As we stepped out, the chapel stood weathered and beautiful, carved pillars, ivy-like veins across the stone, stained glass glowing even in morning light. Inside, sunlight poured through colored windows, dust dancing lazily in the beams. Peaceful, sacred. Marco stayed by the door while I walked the aisle alone. My footsteps echoed, soft, steady. At the altar, hidden behind an old candelabra, was the symbol again, a circle split by a vertical line. The same one from the photo. The door, the letter, everything. My heart thudded. I reached for it. The carved piece shifted under my fingers, like a secret button. A soft click echoed, and a panel opened at the base of the altar, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A secret room. I looked back at Marco. He nodded, calm, like he'd expected this moment for years. With a deep breath, I stepped down into the hidden chamber. Cold stone walls, the faint scent of parchment and dust. At the bottom, candlelight flickered around an old wooden table. And on that table, wrapped in velvet, was a leather-bound journal. My grandfather's name pressed into the cover. My hand shook as I opened it. The first page was dated more than 40 years ago. His words jumped out. To my future heir, not of money, but of legacy. The business is tainted by greed. What I built was meant for good. If you found this, you must finish what I could not. Finish what he couldn't? The journal detailed early projects, not the corporate empire the family flaunted, but humanitarian work, orphanages, clean water systems, scholarships for kids like me. But on later pages, his handwriting grew sharper, angrier. They forced me to choose. Profit over people. Family over love. I lost Isabella. I lost my daughter. But maybe, someday, she will have a daughter strong enough to restore the original vision. A daughter strong enough. He meant me. The enormity of it settled into my bones. My inheritance wasn't a penthouse. It was a mission. A chance to change lives. To repair what greed destroyed. I wiped my eyes with shaking fingers. I didn't feel small anymore. I felt chosen. But purpose, I was learning, comes with enemies. Upstairs, I heard footsteps. Slow, unfamiliar. Voices, sharp, angry, growing closer. My heart dropped as realization hit. Someone else knew I was here. The footsteps above grew louder, more than one pair. Muffled voices. Sharp, irritated. English. My stomach twisted. My family. I closed the journal and slipped it under my jacket just as the hidden staircase door creaked. I stepped back into the shadows as light sliced down the steps. My cousin Ava appeared first, diamond earrings glinting, eyes full of fury. Behind her, Ethan, smug as ever, wearing Dad's old arrogance like a suit. Found you, Ava hissed. How did they even know I was here? They descended, one slow step at a time, like hunters cornering prey. Ethan's eyes flicked to the table. So this is what he left you? A basement and a diary. He laughed, cold, metallic. Ava shoved past him, reaching for the journal still barely visible under my jacket. I'll take that. It belongs to the company. I stepped back. No, it belongs to me. She glared. You got a plane ticket. We got the estate, the assets, everything that matters. I tightened my grip on the journal. This is worth more than any of that. Ethan scoffed. You always were naive, Emily. Grandpa clearly didn't trust you with the business. He knew you'd waste it. His voice sharpened. Just hand over the journal. Family sticks together. The same words I'd heard whispered my whole life. Not love, control. I'm not giving it to you, I said quietly. Ava lunged. Instinct took over. I dodged, her hand just brushing my sleeve. Marco suddenly appeared at the top of the stairs, voice booming. Enough. Ethan spun. Who the hell are you? Marco didn't answer. He stepped between us, stance like a wall. This legacy is not yours. You had your inheritance. Ava's lip curled. We'll sue. We'll take it all back. Marco's reply was simple, chilling. He saw your heart. That's why you got nothing. Their shock lasted only a second, then rage filled the space it left. Ava pointed at me. She doesn't deserve the Harrison name. Marco's hand gripped her wrist mid-reach. Come. Controlled. You don't get to decide that. They tried to push past him, but he didn't move. Not an inch. I realized then he wasn't just a driver. He was protection. For me, I used their distraction. Slipped around the side. Climbed the stairs two at a time. Breath loud. Heart louder. Ethan shouted behind me, footsteps thundering. I burst into the chapel light, ran through the main doors and into open air. My legs flew across gravel, lungs burning. Marco followed Emily to the car. We dove in. Doors slammed. Tires screeched across ancient stone. In the rearview mirror, I saw my cousin spilling out of the chapel, wild, screaming, powerless as dust swallowed them. We didn't speak for several minutes. The city blurred, Rome rushing past like a heartbeat. When we finally stopped outside the villa, Marco turned to me. Do you understand now? I clutched the journal, the real inheritance. He wanted me to fix what they ruined. Marco nodded once. He chose you because you are not driven by greed. You have what the others lack. Courage. Purpose. But something colder settled in my chest. Realization. If they followed me here, they would follow me anywhere. This wasn't over. Inside, Rosa locked the doors, voice urgent. You must decide your next step, Emily. The journal, it can restore the foundation your grandfather dreamed of, or destroy everything they claim. I opened the journal to the last page. One final instruction, written in shaky ink. Show the truth. Expose them. Give the empire back to the people. A choice. Stay silent and safe, or fight and change everything. My fingers closed around the key at my neck. My heart steadied. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of them. I was ready. The villa felt different after the chase, quieter, heavier, like the walls themselves understood the shift inside me. I sat at the dining table with the journal open, pages of dreams and disappointments spread before me. Grandpa hadn't just wanted me to discover the truth. He wanted me to act on it. The next few days blurred into research and planning. Marco drove me to archives, old offices, abandoned project sites. Rosa translated documents, traced names, helped me understand the plans Grandpa never finished. Clean water projects abandoned for profit. Scholarship funds redirected to luxury expansions. Factories opened overseas where labor was cheap and regulations weak. It was all here, proof, not of wealth, but of corruption. The hurt wasn't just personal anymore. It was bigger. Bigger than family drama or inheritance jealousy. Lives had been affected, people forgotten. And somewhere in all that, I felt my purpose forming like a rising sun. One afternoon, I called my mother. My hand shook dialing her number. The moment she answered, I heard surprise, then worry. Emily, are you all right? I told her everything. Rome, Isabella, the chapel, the journal, our family's hidden history. Silence stretched across the ocean. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded like a dam breaking. I never wanted you to carry this pain, she whispered. I wanted you to grow free, not chained to what they did to us. I closed my eyes. Why didn't you ever tell me? She inhaled shakily. Because I was afraid you'd go looking for answers and get hurt like I did. But she didn't stop me. Instead, she added something I didn't expect. Your grandfather believed in you, and so do I. I felt something warm spread in my chest, not pride, but healing. We talked for hours. She cried when I told her Isabella was alive. I cried when she said she might be ready to see her mother again someday. Two broken halves, maybe finally finding their way back. When I hung up, I realized I wasn't alone. Not anymore. With Marco's help, I organized a press meeting, not a flashy one, just enough to bring journalists who valued human stories over headlines. We presented the journal, the documents, photos of projects abandoned for profit. The truth wasn't just read, it was felt. Within a week, news spread. Not scandal, legacy. The story of a billionaire who wanted to give back, whose vision was derailed by greed, but restored by his granddaughter. And my cousins? Their reaction was predictable. Statements were released. Lawyers called. Threats were made. But they were fighting the wrong war. Because while they clung to assets, I gained something more powerful, public trust. Non-profit organizations reached out. Investors who admired Grandpa's early work offered support. Former employees shared testimonies. It was like doors opened where walls had always been. One evening, Rosa handed me a letter. Wax seal. My name. Inside, only one line, written in Grandpa's familiar hand. I knew you would choose the world over wealth. I held that letter to my chest and cried, not from sadness, but release, the kind that washes years of doubt away. Days turned into weeks. I stayed in Rome, working from a small office we opened in the villa's back courtyard. Old plans became new blueprints. Abandoned ideas breathed again. We started with scholarships, the kind meant for kids like I once was. Ordinary kids with extraordinary potential. Every time I signed approval for a scholarship, I felt Grandpa's hand guiding mine. Ava and Ethan still had their money, their penthouse, their yacht. I had something else entirely, purpose, and the strength to carry it. Still, late at night when the city lights glow like embers and the villa grows quiet, I sometimes think back to that funeral. The laughter, the ticket, how small I felt, and how that tiny piece of paper became the doorway to my entire life changing. But there's one last part, one final piece you need to hear, the part where everything comes full circle. Because as I stood on a rooftop overlooking Rome one calm evening, someone walked up behind me softly and said a sentence that made my heart stop. I didn't turn around right away. The sun was setting over Rome, orange sinking into rooftops like a soft goodbye. The breeze smelled of bread and warm stone, and for the first time in my life, I felt steady, whole. But the footsteps behind me were careful, hesitant, like someone approaching a memory. When I finally turned, there she was, my mother, not calling from across an ocean, not crying through a phone. She was here, standing on the rooftop with a small suitcase and eyes full of centuries. I froze. You came. She gave a trembling smile. I had to. I've hidden from the past long enough, and you walked straight into it with more courage than I ever had. She stepped closer. I saw her gaze sweep across the city, then fall on me with something fragile and proud. I want to meet her, she whispered. Your grandmother. My heart tightened, not from pain, but from something like healing. The broken story was mending itself, thread by golden thread. The next day, I brought her to Isabella's door. They stood inches apart, two lives separated by decades, finally face to face again. I watched them reach for one another, hands shaking, tears falling before words even came. Forgiveness, I learned then, doesn't always need explanation. Sometimes, it just needs presence. The three of us sat in Isabella's kitchen, sunlight cutting through lace curtains. They talked for hours about the past, about choices, about wounds that shaped us. I listened, absorbing roots I never knew I had. For once, family didn't feel like a weight. It felt like belonging. In the weeks that followed, our work grew. The nonprofit gained momentum. Projects launched. Children received scholarships. Old blueprints transformed into living hope. And the world began to remember Grandpa Joe not for the empire he left behind, but for the one he intended to build. Every week I visited the chapel, no longer as the girl who arrived confused, but as the woman who found meaning underground in dust and candlelight. Sometimes I still reread his journal. One line always stops me. Legacy is not what you keep, it's what you give. I think about that funeral often. The penthouse, the yacht, the millions. My cousins got everything money could measure. I got a plane ticket, a secret, a mission, and in the end, I was the one who inherited him. Grandpa didn't want to enrich me. He wanted to entrust me. He saw something in me they never noticed. Not weakness, not poverty. And heart, I've learned, is the currency that outlives us all. Now, when people ask about the plane ticket, I just smile. Because that ticket wasn't the smallest inheritance. It was the biggest. It was the key to identity, forgiveness, and purpose I never knew I needed. So if you ever find yourself feeling like the least valued person in the room, remember this. Sometimes the smallest gift holds the greatest destiny. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels. A life's worth isn't measured by what we're given, but by what we choose to create from it.